Hey everybody, welcome to Strong Christian Female. This week is Leanna Crawford. And if you're not sure who Leanna Crawford is, you're not going to want to not know who she is any longer. Click below. You will hear her music. You will see how to get in touch with her tour dates and everything else that's going on with her. She's wonderful. She is a Christian singer. She lives in Nashville. She grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and she's going to share some of her heart today, as well as I ask her a few questions about her upbringing and some other things. And she's just the real deal. She pours honesty and truth into her songs and her music. I actually find many of them just enjoyable and fun, but also some of the ones that really hit deep are the ones that resonate on a level of just the human experience and how God can reach down into that human experience and really elevate us through his grace and mercy. And she just does a lovely job of being able to do that. I'm always in awe of when people can write lyrics and music that inspire or infuse some emotion because of its truthfulness. And she is one of those people. We actually talk a little bit about that in the interview. So without further ado, the lovely, the wonderful, the truthful, and the genuine Leanna Crawford. Everybody, thank you so much for coming back to Strong Christian Female. And I'm just so excited to have Leanna Crawford here today. I have questions for her, but I'm going to hand her the reins right off the bat. Leanna, first of all, thank you for joining me. I know you're traveling right now. You are visiting. Can you share with us who you're visiting?
Yes, well, thank you for having me. This is so fun to be here and to get to hang. I'm currently in Utah. I'm in Salt Lake. It's such a beautiful time of year to be here too. It's just gorgeous. But I'm actually visiting my fiance.
Yay. Is
I
that
just
fun
got
to say?
engaged.
Whoop, whoop. I just love
Listen,
the word fiance. Like I'm just like, just say it again. You know, it's so flowy. I love
it
how
was,
Americans still use it.
I love it. Like I think it's such a fun. Like I'm like fiance. Here we are. It's so
Here we
fancy.
are. It just makes you feel super grown up to be like, ooh, I just crossed over like into adulthood because I'm officially engaged. Like,
It
well,
is.
I won't ask you to dish on the whole story because I know that's more of a personal thing and we're not super close yet.
Oh,
Yet,
I mean,
I would say.
I can talk about them all day. I can talk about.
But that's what to be. Like I love that. And I know that you have 4 kids in your family, right? And I don't know.
Mhm.
I know you have at least a sister. What is the mix of siblings?
Yeah, so it goes my oldest sister, and then my brother, and then me, and then my youngest sister. And my parents did, so all 3 girls, we all have L names. So it's Lauren, Leanna, and Lindsay.
Nice.
That never confuses anybody. And then my brother is Craig. So he like, there's
God
just
bless him.
I know, like his Craig, like his just I don't know if they planned because like my sister and I are like the babies, but my mom said she loved L names because she loved writing them in cursive, and there's probably other
Yes.
reasons for that too. But like L is so pretty. But so, anyways, Craig got left out of the L thing, but I think he doesn't care. He's a good sport about it. But my most of my family is still in Washington State where I'm from, and then my sister Lindsay and I were only 16 months apart, and her and I moved to Nashville like 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years. So we've been out
Oh,
there, but that's kind of the order of the fam.
I love that. So you do have, I knew you had an older sister, but I wasn't totally sure if your brother was older or younger. So you had an older brother, and I'm just curious. So I had older brothers growing up. And do you feel like that made you look at guys different? Like having a brother that close that's like he's just a boy. Like bleh, boys are smelly and they make weird jokes and they're just boys. Because I just curious if you feel like that influenced just kind of how you looked at men. Because I know some women who don't have brothers and opposite boys who don't have women in their life. It's more of a unknown species, why?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I feel like it's like okay, kind of was able to like look at him and that, and he was such a good big brother too. But definitely like it was like oh no, he's just like he always had his friends over. So it was like I was just so used to like you're just around all the guys
Right.
growing up, and Lindsay and I are just the annoying little sisters that
Mhm.
just like hang
Mhm.
out with them, and they were like he was so sweet to us. But it was just like there's like oh my brother and all of his friends.
Yeah, that are annoying and they won't get out of my room and they play music too loud
Yeah.
and they're just being stupid
He was
bugging.
since he was older, he's 4 years older than me, 3 years, 4 years older than me. All of my friends had crushes on him. So
Uh-huh.
that was like, and I was like, I was like, that's
You're like,
kind of,
"Ugh."
weird. I was like, no.
You're like, guys, do you know him? Have you met
He's
him?
like,
Like,
that's my
I'm just here
brother.
to tell you, I love him, but ugh, not like, yeah, because you don't think of your brother's cute or charming, or I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't grow up thinking my brother was cute or charming. God bless him. I was
How
like,
many brothers did you have?
two. I had two older brothers, and yeah,
They probably really picked on you, especially if there's two of them. I'm sure they were like that.
well,
I feel like
yeah,
because of just my one, like our one brother,
he
like I
was,
think he
yeah.
was so sweet, maybe like,
Aw. I feel
but
like that second born kid though. I mean, it's weird. I don't know why. I don't do a lot of the birth order stuff, honestly, because like I read that once as a kid. And I'm like, well, this ain't my family. I'm the baby, and I'm nothing like that. I should be the oldest according to this chart.
yeah,
And our oldest should have not been the oldest. Like our kids don't fit that mold. But I will say, like, I feel like every family has a sweetheart, like a sweetie, like just a sweet, like, oh, tender hearted, just a sweetheart. And when it, I don't know. My second born is that way, and I have all boys, but
I
yeah,
love
and it's
that.
hard to not love a sibling that's sweet. Although,
Mm.
I don't know how your oldest sister is, but my oldest son is like, when he was like, genuinely, he was 6 years old, and my second born son, was just he got his feelings hurt by a kid. And my oldest was just so exacerbated about the whole thing. He was just like, Mom, he's just so tender-hearted. And he was so irritated, but he was saying tender-hearted. And I just remember being like, A, who taught you the phrase tender-hearted? It's perfectly applied to my son, but I was like, and you're so irritated about it. I was like, okay, that's an oldest perspective right there. Like I recognize he's tender-hearted, and it's super annoying. And I'm like, all right, well, there you are. So I don't know if
That
your older
is
sister I don't know.
that is amazing. Yeah, I don't my older sister is like definitely I feel like the oldest in that she's like I feel like I know a little, like I remember a little like the birth order, like I had friends tell me about it, but like for our family because there's like my older siblings and then there's a little gap and then Lindsay and
Uh-huh.
and we like I like thank my older siblings because we were able to watch like a lot of their mistakes that they made.
Oh, for
And like
sure.
Lindsay and I
Oh, for
were
sure.
like we're like, "Oh, okay, I don't want to do that because that makes mom and dad
No.
mad." And so like
Yeah.
we were like, "Well, we'll just be." So my parents gave, they always said about the youngest kids, but like we got probably more free reign, but I was like, "Well, that's because we watched you guys make mistakes and we like don't need to." But my
Yeah.
older sister was we're so close, like all of us girls are very close, like my mom, like all of us are like besties, but besties. uh
I love that though.
but
That's awesome.
oh my gosh, it's so special. We weren't as close when like she was in high school and we were younger, but when she like moved back home after she graduated college, and I must have been like I was high school at that point, and we like for the first little while when she moved back, we like butted heads because I had decided that I was like oldest, like we're very alike.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that we were very alike. We're like both very like, and so we were like, we would get into it because it was all of a sudden like she's the oldest and she's like coming back into territory. But I was like, no, this is my turf now.
Yeah.
But now we're
You can't say anything
good.
to you ever again.
But it was like we would get in these arguments, and I was like, sorry, but I was like, this is so funny because we're like we get along so well. But it was just probably because she's just reasserting her dominance. But
Oh
she's
yeah.
like very much she's like amazing. Like she's amazing. We like are best friends. But it was so funny because I look back at that time and I was like, we definitely like it was good for us. There was some growing. And I was like, you can be the oldest. It's fine.
Well, the thing about family is you could leave for 20 years, you walk back in that house and you're still back in that pecking order and you're fighting it because you're like, I actually wrote this is not a braggadocious thing, but I wrote a play. It was grueling. I thought, I knew I wasn't a writer, but I'm like, I have this idea. I don't know if this is how songwriters do it, but you're like, I have this idea. Let's see if this works. And then I wrote a play, and my initial idea was this romantic comedy, and I go to write it, and I'm just really having a hard time being honest because it's coming across as kind of hurtful. And so
Mm.
just for funsies, I wrote a scene with siblings, and it was hilarious, even though they were but they were grown-ups. They were in their 30s. And they were literally just like the sister was just asking the other sister what this dress makes her look like. And I just was like, oh, I can write siblings because I can be really honest and it's funny because
Right.
there's just that sibling thing of like, no,
Right.
that looks really terrible. You're going to need to go change. Like, okay. You know, but if you walk out and ask your husband, like, does this look okay? And he's like, no, that
Yeah.
looks really terrible. Go change. You're going to be like, why are you so mean to me? You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
how come I can't be so transparent? So apparently siblings are very transparent, like, and it doesn't change. You'll just keep aging and you're going to be like, guys, we're not teenagers anymore. Like, I really do have a vote on this opinion, and I can, you know, tell you a little bit about what I think, you know, and it's never bad. It's just funny to see that like ebb and flow. And it's kind of weird to realize, like, someday you'll be a parent. I'm like, oh, I won't be here someday, but you'll still have each other. Huh?
Mm.
What will you say about me? No, I shouldn't say that. I'll be like,
It is so funny. I feel like it really like when she moved back to and we kind of like would get in our little arguments, which we like rarely do now, but it's like sweet because especially when you get older, there is this respect of like, okay, I'm sorry, we're like, we're kind of equals now. Even though it doesn't feel like there's a 7-year age gap or however much it is, like it doesn't feel like that. And so it's really sweet to be like, no, we can just be best friends and we're honest with each other. Be like, I like trust them with anything because I know they're going to be honest with me. And I'm like, does this sound good? Does this make sense? They're like, actually, no. Like, let's try. But I'm like, I totally love it. But I trust them with anything because I'm like, okay, no. But it is like, it is really special. And I wish like more people felt that way about their family. And obviously not everybody can have that, but I'm like so grateful to have
and
that
that's
because it's,
really it's such, I mean, I don't even mean this like flippity do. It really is such a gift that a lot of people they don't feel like, I don't know, especially those that come to the Lord and they're not in a Christian home, or maybe their home is what they perceive to be as a little more legalistic.
hmm
Like I didn't mind strict boundaries. My kids have strict boundaries, but with a lot of just understanding, I'm not putting these boundaries down because you're a bad person. I'm putting these boundaries down because you're a human. And God says to set strict boundaries on our lives if we're going to follow Him. And you have to make this decision for yourself, but your dad and I follow Jesus, so we are going to set these strict boundaries too. And they're like, okay, but it's not out of shame. But I feel like people that maybe their parents didn't do a good job of it, of approaching it with that sort of
hmm
explanation or vantage point, and they felt shamed, or I mean, I hate the sad part about growing up is people start to judge the past adults they had in their life in a light that I feel like sometimes is not very forgiving, if I'm being frank.
hmm
So it's like this whole thing about like, people are just saying, well, I feel like they should have done this. And I'm like, well, I'm not even saying they shouldn't, but can you maybe see that they were still trying to do the right thing? But for people that
hmm
don't feel like they can be honest with their parents without maybe feeling judged, or be honest with their
mm
sibling, like, it's such a blessing that you had that family that's like, they're going to be honest with you, but they're going to love you at the end of the day.
Right.
And you're
Right.
all, and I love that too, because this is going to kind of springboard into our first conversation, question, or first conversation. We might have 20 conversations, you guys, whatever happens. But
Yeah.
I also love that your songs are written from a vantage point of honesty. Like, I feel like a lot of Christian songs that are more popular on the radio, not necessarily more popular on Spotify or other things, it are the ones that are either, how do I balance this? Because I want to be careful, because I do know people in the music industry and I have a lot of respect for them, but
Yeah. Yeah.
they're happy. It's a perfect bow at the end of everything.
hmm
Either like, I'm really sad and I need help, or my life is perfect and I'm fine and I'm so glad I'm a Christian. And I'm like, well, there's this wrestling match of truth somewhere in there. And when I was
hmm
listening to several of your songs, what I loved was that so many of them started out just with, listen, this is how life is, and yet there's still God, right?
hmm
This is the truth of the reality of the human experience, and yet look around you, you guys. Is this amazing? Like, I loved that some of your songs, like when the song about the funeral song that you play on a ukulele.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the most awesome song, because you should be celebrating the death of your old self, right?
hmm
But so many of us, I feel, wrestle with that death, because we're like, well, can we sort of keep them on life support? Like, can we keep some things like Jesus? Do we have to really kill our old selves? You know what I mean? Like, can we just hold on to like a few things, like some shows I like and maybe some addictions I have? I'm just being transparent about like where God
Yeah.
dealt with me, like, or some people I want to hang out with, and God's like, no, you get to. But that's why I love that song because I'm like, oh, what a great
Mm.
take on whoop, whoop. Like we don't have to live in bondage to this old self.
Right.
So I guess one of my questions is how do you live in the reality of like looking around you and saying, wow, life's pretty hard right now. People are living disconnected. There's anxiety, there's depression, there's all these things. And yet there's still this amazing God who loves you. Like as an artist, how do you wrestle
Yeah.
through those two coinciding truths?
I think it's like, and I think it's a wrestling match for sure. And it's this constant like, okay, needing it really helps me just in like a very, excuse me, a very like practical sense to like be able to look back. And I think I've been like kind of trying, I've been full transparency, I've been trying to like read through the Bible and like read through it. I honestly don't know if I like have ever read through it from start to finish. So I was like, I've read, like I'm like, okay, I want to do this. And it's taken me a very long time. Like I'm just like slowly going through it. But I'm still, chugging my way through the Old Testament, and it's just wild to me to see how many like countless times like Israel goes and God's like, do this, and I'm going to make you prosperous and bless the nation, and it's just going to, I'm going to take care of you, right? And they're like, okay, and then they just do the total opposite, right? Like it's just over and over again. That's like the whole New Testament. I mean, the Old Testament is just like God just giving grace and constant mercy to the people of Israel. And I feel like that's like me is like I forget like constantly, like I constantly forget how good God has been. And like I'll be in the middle of a, something wild. And it's like, I feel like it's still just, it's like for me, helpful to be able to look back and see where he has already been faithful in my life. And I feel like the Israelites in that, like, I feel like they had, short-term memory. Like, it's like they, he got them out of Egypt and they're like, well, now he's gonna, we're gonna die because we can't, there's a, we gotta cross the Red Sea. And he's like, no, like, did you forget what I just did for you? Literally, like, I just did
Yeah.
that.
Like
And I feel like
10
that's
minutes
like,
ago over there.
yeah, literally
Now
10
you're
minutes
like,
ago, I got you out and now you're worried about this. And that's how I feel. Like, I'm like,
yeah.
no, like he's literally done that for me so many times. And then it'll be, 10 minutes later and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And yet he's like faithful again. And I just like, I had this like realization a little while ago. It's crazy. Like something happened 2 years ago and it was so traumatic at this time. And I just had this realization literally last week. And I was like, holy cow, God, even though I thought it was like the worst thing ever, like God did that in order for me to grow. And I like can see like his, like what his plan was. It was not what I thought was a good idea, but it was like so it was literally like I can't see it now looking back. I'm like, oh, that had to happen and it's so much better now. Like it really is, and I've grown so much. And so for me, I think the wrestling happens in like remembering and looking back. And I feel like I have short-term memory. And so I have to look back. And I feel like the Israelites feel like I'm like, I forgot what God did 10 minutes ago by like literally freeing me. And I just looking back and having people in my life to be able to do that and to speak like truth to me, even when I don't want to hear it sometimes, like that is super helpful as well. And also like I talk about this a lot, but I date my journal entries and then I will look back and then I can like see like something I was praying for and then like God is answering. Like I'm like, oh wow, holy cow. Like God answered that. And so that's something too. There's like just things that I do like and I'm like, okay, I feel like I have to be reminded constantly. So I'm like,
Yeah.
what? And
It's true. Like, and it's like, God set them all free. And then Moses goes up to the mountain for like, what is it, 30 days? And it's like,
yeah.
let's build a golden calf, which was a god
Yeah.
from Egypt. Let's build one of those gods from Egypt that we worshipped for 400 years because obviously
Yeah.
this guy's gone. And I'm like, he just went. what?
Yeah.
And it's easy. And I love your perspective because it's so easy to judge other people until you realize, oh, right. Like he just answered my prayer 2 days ago, and already I'm panicking because something else didn't instantaneously happen for me. And God's always taking care of me. But it's like you get these blurry perspectives because we're like goldfish. We like forget, like just going swimming around
Yeah.
the bowl, forgotten where we are. Like I don't. It's I love that you're reading the Old Testament too, because there's some, like Leviticus. You're like, yikes! I did a study on Ecclesiastes. I'm like, I'm sad. This is depressing, you guys. Why do I need to
Yeah.
know any of this? But it's so enriching too at the same time, because so many people there's a lady who came to the Lord later in life after being a tenured professor at Syracuse. She's an amazing woman and living a life that was not for the Lord. And she said, she came to the Lord reluctantly after proving him right when she was trying to prove him wrong, prove that.
Mm.
And she said, so often we say what the Bible says, but we don't talk about what the Bible is. And it's
Mm.
the inerrant word of God. So when you read it, the Holy Spirit, you're laying down this foundational opportunity for the Holy Spirit to mold you and craft you
Mm.
and change your heart. And I think, Leanna, you are not alone in the whole, have I read from Genesis to Revelation straight through? I'm pretty sure somewhere in my life I've read the whole Bible, but that whole thing, good for you, and I should do that as well. I have read the whole Bible, but
It's
that linear thing, I'm like, I gotta skip to Second Corinthians. I gotta like move to
yeah.
Corinthians.
I gotta get to something I can
Can you just give
understand.
me the
Some
New
of this,
Testament, Lord, please? And
it
yet
is.
it's so fascinating when you read it because it's just
It is. It is. And I'm in like the story portion now. So it's like it's helpful
yes.
too, but it goes, there's all the different things. But it is so funny because I grew up in the church and I feel like especially people that like grow up in church,
Mhm.
they feel like they're supposed to know
Yeah.
answers just because they grew up or like
Hmm.
I'm like, there's shame because I haven't read the Bible all the way through. And it's like that's just like
Yeah.
it's so funny. But I'm like, no, like what like I haven't done it. Like I'm like pretty sure I've never done it and I'm doing it now. But I grew up in the church and I just like I was like I want to do this one, but it's so good for me. But it is just funny, and I think you like all the Bible stories growing up, and I'm like, man, how could the Israelites like just like turn on God like that? It's just like over and over again. And then I'm like, oh well, okay, I kind of relate to that. Like I'm just like, oh
Oh,
okay, here I am. Like
yeah.
I forgot
Darn.
like already.
Yeah, the worst thing about reading the Bible is you'll see a lot of yourself in there. You're like,
There
oh,
they go.
yeah, because we all want to be like, I mean, there's only one Jesus in the world ever, guys. So we're either one of the disciples who are a bunch of knuckleheads, or we're one of the Israelites who are a bunch of knuckleheads, or like, it's rare that we're going to be like, I mean, there's just no one in there that isn't in his grace kind of a mess up that he redeems, right? So it's like
Right.
those redeeming stories. But like you said, we want to be from the vantage point like, oh, those guys are such idiots. And it's like, oh, oops, that's just me. That's just me.
Okay.
It's just me, what I would have been like 2,000 years ago. I just had a bunch of me, like surround. It would have been a bunch of us, like.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of the church, I love that you were raised in the church, and you were
Yeah.
raised in the Pacific Northwest,
Yeah.
and that is so. For those listening that are not from the Pacific Northwest, I'm not from there, but I lived there 16 years. And I love it. It's beautiful. There's a deep rootedness of those that have a faith. Those that have a faith there, it is another level, in my opinion. It isn't flippant. It isn't like there's a church on every corner. Let's go church shopping. Those that are in church, they're in church. Like they are deep wells. How
Yeah.
do you feel that spiritual foundation of
Yeah.
being in a part of the United States where culturally it wasn't as
Right.
common, right? Like I know you're in Tennessee now. It's just more common to meet people that grew up in the church than
Right.
people in the Northwest that grew up in the church. How do you feel like that spiritual foundation prepared you for what you do now?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's a wild thing. I think just like moving to Tennessee and even talking about like telling people like, oh yeah, like I, in Washington, like, where I'm from, the Pacific Northwest, I'll be like, I do Christian music. And they're like, you do what? Like,
Yeah.
it's just like, we're like, I'm like, but in like, Tennessee at first, we're like, oh yeah, I do music. I do Christian music. And they're like, oh, cool. Like, it's just like so normal. There's a
Yeah.
church on every corner.
I
There's,
do. You know what I
there's,
mean? Like, oh, so does
yeah,
my
it's like,
neighbor. Like, yeah.
me too. Yeah. Like, so and so goes to my church. Like, it's just like everybody goes to church, everybody, and it's such a beautiful thing. And I think it's awesome. But there is like growing up, and I came from, in an hour north of Seattle even. So it's more rural, but you're still in, the Pacific Northwest. And there was a few churches in my town, and I'm super grateful to like I have not everybody feels this way about their church, and I wish that's like wasn't the case, but like I have like really sweet memories, and I had like a very incredible like not a perfect church, not perfect people. But it was a sweet like it was a just a sweet church. My parents still go there. Like they've been there 35 plus years. Like it's just like it's very rare maybe now that like that could be a thing. And that all those there's lots of different things for that reason. But it was a sweet place to grow up and be raised in that. And my parents were very like they weren't necessarily, I would say, like strict when it came to like certain things, but it was like we were at church a lot. Like we did a lot of sports as well. Like my sister and I rode horses, so we were gone a lot of weekends too. But like we were at church, and then if not, we were also at youth group or both. Like we were just like we were always there, and it was very much a part of my growing up. Like it was like I was also homeschooled, so a lot of my friends were from church. So it was like they they were either from, I actually did some musicals growing up, which was fun, just a few, and loved them. But they were either like did, musicals, they were either in the horse world or they were from church. Like those were like, and it was a very special thing to have that. And a lot of my best friends in high school, all church, like I had a sweet, of course, high school, there's all the drama, and you can't really, even if you're homeschooled, you just can't get past it. Like you got to be into some of it. But I have very sweet memories, and this foundation of like, I was surrounded by like-minded, like high schoolers. They're all like, we were doing mission trips together. We were doing service projects. Like it was like very a part of our like culture and in our small little church, in our, little community. And I couldn't be more like grateful for that. And I know that is like a rarity thing, but I even like still will go back and sing sometimes for Christmas Eve. Like it's like I'm still a part of that. But it definitely, I think it's in like the Pacific Northwest, it feels like you're either a believer or you're not kind of thing. And of course there's still like, even if you grow up in the church, there's still you can go kind of middle ground or whatever, but it still is like, there's a contrast of which, like you were there for 16 years and you're like in the heart of it. Like it's,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
either
It's like,
a believer or you're not. Like
and if you're
it's
not,
great.
you'll get worn out and you'll leave. Like if you come in and the only reason you're Christian is because your parents drug you to church on Sundays and you've never owned that faith for yourself, it may take 10 years, but I watched so many of my friends over that 16 years just lose I don't even know if I want to say they lost their faith. I just think they never took ownership of the faith walk for themselves, and they never followed Jesus on their own. So they eventually just started following New Age or whatever else. And yeah, it's just
It's
starkly black and white compared to, I feel like, the South,
It is. It was so interesting and fascinating to move to the South after like growing up there for sure. And there's a lot of like beautiful churches that are there. Like
Oh, for
there are
sure.
some awesome churches, and it's like but it is that crazy contrast, and it's wild. But yeah, and you have to be, anywhere you go, right? You need to be like
Oh,
strong,
absolutely.
but it is wild when you can, everybody goes to church in the South. It's not a weird thing. Like it's just
No,
everybody does,
it's
and
almost a
not.
cultural thing. It's like,
It is. It
I
is. So
mean, I
there's
grew
like,
up down there too, so I loved it, but I didn't realize not everybody did that. And I was like, wait, you guys don't go to church? They're like, no. I'm like, what do you do on Sundays? It's like, did not even compute. And they're like, nothing. We go to coffee. I'm like, there's things open on Sunday. Like, you know, I mean, there's now, but like when I was a kid, everything was shut on Sundays, you know.
Yeah.
It was like everybody's at church. So
It's so wild, but I'm super super grateful. And as much as there is like I do believe like a spiritual like darkness,
yeah,
so like
yeah,
in a lot of those areas, like it totally is. There's also like some
yeah,
incredible light and just like
absolutely.
amazing, but it is that crazy like contrast again. And I know
Yeah.
it is. I mean, that's a lot of like the West Coast, especially the Pacific
Oh my gosh.
Northwest.
Well, it's like lighting a match in a cave, right? Like you're
Right.
like, "Boo," all of a sudden, you know, that's what the churches there are. You know, they are like a match in a cave or a lantern, and you're just like, oh my gosh, you stick close to it because it's the only way you're going to find your way through. But it seems so unbelievably bright because of how deep the darkness around them is.
Right.
And so on that, like you were saying, in that respect, like it's amazing, you know. I mean, and so I feel like what I've told people, I'm like, I think that one of the greatest things that ever happened to me was moving from one extreme to the other when it came to, because it challenged my faith. Do I
Mm-hmm.
believe what the Bible says is true? Do I
Mm-hmm.
actually believe this? Because I had every opportunity not to, because of the philosophical deviations of my Christian friends and how they would water down the word and excuse things away. And I just knew, because of my deep rooted faith with the Lord, I'm like, this is not okay. So it's interesting to be tested, even though you're not looking for it, you know. And some people test the other way, like they get too comfortable and they don't feel like they have to, you know, do anything. But I love that. I love that God allowed you to grow up. Ladies, I'm sorry about the dinging. I've turned it off 3 times.
I'm sorry too, because mine
It's
was
okay.
dinging earlier.
They'll be fine. They'll, you know what's cracking me up is I bet how many people are looking at their phone. Like, is my phone like, oh, that's them. They're probably not
Sorry,
even
guys.
noticed. It's okay, guys. We're all just a little cuckoo. So I know you have a life to live and things to do, but so there were kind of two things, and I think I can fit them into one question. Let's see if she can do it. So like what I know about creativity and the creative process is it's a lot of inspiration, and then a lot of being willing to tear it apart and build it back up, and tear it apart and build it back up, right? And then
Mhm.
in order to be in a level of accomplishment that you are, it's a ton of hard work, and it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of, oh my gosh, I love this, and people going, hey, you know, like I was just listening to this story by a group, and he was hilarious, and he said, so here's the song we're going to sing that is not a hit, and here's why it's not a hit. It's because it's about monogamous relationships and long-term love, and apparently that's not popular in our genre, but we're going to sing it anyway. And I loved it because it was just so true. The guy, their manager was like, so I need some sort of breakup, some sort of sadness, some sort of heartache, some sort of wrestling, some sort of something. And this is about monogamy and love and devotion. Not going to go anywhere. And so they put it on their album, and the irony is on Spotify it's one of their biggest hits. But he's really honest in concert about it, and I laughed because I was like, here these guys are, and they've reached a certain level of accomplishment, and they just want to write what they want to write. And I'm being really transparent. People want to, it's just true. A lot of us want a hook, or we want to feel like we can go on that journey with you, or we want a reason to stay in the story. And that's true of screenwriting. That's true of a lot of things. Torture the hero is what they call it. You got to torture the
Right.
hero. And it works. Like every really good movie, if you think about it, there's probably a little bit of torturing of the hero, you know, of some kind. And songs are sort
Mhm.
of the same way. There's a build, there's this. So how do you, just as curiosity as a creative, how do you let that hard work and that inspiration you feel like is from the Lord work in tandem with each other? Because they really
Mm.
do. Because it's not to say that the songs that hit the floor are any less valuable than the ones that go onto the album. But I'm just curious, not your process of songwriting so much as, is there a process you go through of what you decide, no, I feel like this really is what's supposed to go out there. I really do
Mhm.
feel, and I know I'm going to work really hard, and I've worked really hard on this song, but it's a combination of what do I give up on and what do I pursue, even if it's just
Yeah.
pursue what goes on your album.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, the not like creative way would be to say there's also like it's myself and my like label and
Hmm.
management that help decide that. Like that's like
For sure.
the side of it that's like kind of like, behind the curtain a little bit of like sometimes it is like, the artists that are, in the studio for weeks and they're, slaving away like, the John Mayers of the world or just Taylor Swifts and they're like they put whatever they want on an album, right? And like that's a beautiful thing for them. For someone like me who's still leaning into the wisdom of the people that have been in the industry 20, 30 years, longer than me, I want their wisdom, but I have heard like, a lot of, artists that have been in it a long time, they'll like have told me different things. But I remember one artist had just finished writing and he told me to like fight for the songs that even if they're not singles, like a lot of the times like the teams like you're saying like the songs that everybody hears aren't often the time like the songs that like are the ones that like really mean like the most to like an artist. Not that they don't and they're any less like like special, but it's just like oftentimes they might not be like the ones that are like the heart songs. And so like that artist shared like besides the singles like fight for the other ones on the album because like that's where you're able to be creative, which is like that's like the in an album cycle, this is like so nerdy, but like that's like the album cycle, you might have like two or three singles from that album, radio singles, and the rest of the songs, the fans might hear them or Spotify or Apple Music, those people might hear them, but probably most of the majority of the audience won't, and that's true in like most genres of music. Like it's just like true across the board. That's just like what it is. Like we consume one song, we don't consume like a whole album usually. And so there's that side of it, but I think balancing like I I want like it's really easy to want to like to fight for like the radio hit or what you think, like what I think in my mind is like what is like the radio hit, what is the song that everybody's gonna like, it's gonna speak to everybody, not in a manipulative way, but like in a way of like I want a song to like to speak to whoever it's supposed to speak to, but like write that radio song, which is like such a weird thing to be like we're writing that, but it is like that's kind of what you do sometimes. But then there's also these other rights that are even more powerful when you're just trying to write the song and like serve the song. And then sometimes that ends up becoming the song that, well, you never expected, the team to connect with. But sometimes I think in my case, like I've only had a couple songs to radio, but especially my last one that went to radio was a song called Mean Girls. When I wrote that song and had this idea, I never thought like it would be radio. Like I just it wasn't even the title. Like it's just not meant for that. And it ended up getting played and some stations played, and it was like crazy because I was like, but it was one of those songs that I was like, I didn't think that would be at all, but it was really close to my heart. And it was one of those like where I was like, okay, I served the song the best way I could. And that's like my goal in my heart. Like I want to write. And I think most people do. Like I think everybody wants to write honest songs, but then there's also it's just this like hard balance of like, okay, I also want to, have like what is success too. And you're right, like, you're in the industry and radio is an amazing thing. And you also want songs to be there, but then you also want songs to be over here. And so I feel like that's what I'm like in the process of and in the middle of like constantly trying to figure that out. And sometimes I get caught in that and like caught in like, okay, but I don't think I would say this. Like, I don't think this could be radio. And then someone like literally this happened a few weeks ago. And I was like, I just don't know if this is radio. And then one of the other writers was like, well, let's like serve the song and let's like not worry about that. And then if we need to come back and tweak it, we totally can. But it was like a really good check for me to be like, okay, that I want this to be a creative process. I want to be moved by what I'm doing. And when I have that perspective, I am like, I'm like, okay, I'm almost in tears, like, writing this, and who knows if it'll ever see the light of day. But that's like such a beautiful, like, it's such a beautiful process. And so I feel like I'm constantly like checking my heart of like, okay, what, like, I want to, serve the song. I also want people to be able to connect with the song. But I feel like I connect with songs when writers are really honest about
Absolutely.
themselves. And so
Yep.
I'm like, okay, how can I do that for other people? How can I be honest about me and what I'm going through, whether that is a, maybe a more joyful song, maybe a sad song, or maybe in the middle of it song or whatever it is. And how can I be honest? Because that's when I feel most connected to music, is when people are
Absolutely.
honest with themselves. And there's so many songwriters I love that do that so well. But I think it's just a constant like thing I'm learning and like processing through. And I want to write,
Yeah.
honest songs, but it's like I can say that, but like how do you do that? And it's like I want, so I'm super just in the process of that. I'm super
Well,
grateful to be like I have
how
the
are
freedom
you
to do that.
yeah, I mean, it's like how do you write sincerely, but from the vantage point of also knowing whether we like it or not, the more you learn, sometimes the more complicated a process becomes, because now instead of being 14 and sitting down at the piano and plucking out something for funsies, you're like, all, whether you like it or not, you've been taught some formulaic stuff. You've been taught what a hook is. You've been taught, and it's like that knowledge is not bad, but it's like, how do you peel back all the knowledge and just sit down and be raw, at least with the first version of it. And then, I think Phil Wickham does a lovely job on some of his songs of just being like, dude, did you just walk in the room and like sit down at the piano and like, what the heck? Like Adele, she's phenomenal at that, especially her first two albums. I mean, I get that she may not have the same worldview as everybody, but the reason that girl went gangbusters, she was 19, is because she sat at a piano and poured her heart out and broke your heart listening to some of her stuff. And I mean, in my
Mhm.
era, way back in the day, ladies, I didn't own the album, so don't be judgy. But Alanis Morissette shattered the glass ceiling because everybody owned that girl's album, even in my Christian school at college. So I'd be walking down the hall and hear like Alanis, Alanis, Alanis. I'm just getting to my room and it's like every other song is playing. I'm like, okay, someone's having a jagged little pill of a day. And I just opened but I mean, she went gangbusters because she wrote about what was done to her in a way
Mhm.
that people were like, dang, this woman's, and it wasn't necessarily whining and complaining,
Mhm.
but it was raw and honest. So I love that you were so transparent about that answer, because I also commend artists. It's funny, I've sat around with artists. um, do we call them artists? She says to herself, when around with people for decades, and they'll philosophize about art and not know how to make money at it. And I love this. There's a book called "Real Artists Don't Starve," and I was like,
Mm.
"Ooh, that's got my attention," because I agree with
That sounds
that.
like a good book.
And his whole thing was, listen, like if it's like Michelangelo was employed his whole life after he apprenticed at the age of 14, right? He wasn't allowed to touch anything for 10 years, because
Mm.
maybe it was even 15 years, because the guy he was apprenticed under didn't let anybody do anything except like little bits of things. He never had his own individual work. But once he did, he ran with it. And he wasn't always doing what he thought was a masterpiece. He was working a
Mm.
job and making money. And I think
Mm.
in that, he still brought glory to God. Like, I don't know that, and the Sistine Chapel wasn't his idea. It was something he was allowed to do, and it was something he
Mm.
was hired to do. And he poured everything he could into it, and yet he
Mhm.
didn't commission it. He didn't pay for it. Like, I think we have to have these balances as Christians to say, if God opens a door for us to step through, like he's opened a door for you. I love that you wrestle through this, because you do want to serve the song, but because that is the business. And yet,
Mhm.
how do you also serve God? And I feel like
Mhm.
what I'm praying for God to do, and I feel like he is doing this, so I don't want to be misunderstood, is to pour out more of his spirit on the artists that
Yeah.
have that vantage. And even if it is like you're at a concert and you sit down at the piano and you're like, I'm just going to play something that's coming to me right now, not that you would
Mm.
audibly express that. I think worship leaders have that luxury a lot of times, those that are allowed to just do their thing.
Right.
But I don't know that always, once we pigeonhole someone into an artist that writes songs for radio or whatever, we should give them that freedom, because I think that's their first love. So
Yeah.
I love that. And I really do respect any Christian artist who's in this industry wrestling through that, because it is hard. And I say, and this is my opinion, not Leanna's, praise God, you make money at it. Like, do it. Like, who wouldn't? You guys, let's be grown-ups for a second. Who doesn't want to make money doing what they love? Then do it. As long as it doesn't go against your moral compass. Like, everyone's working a job at some point to make money, but if it's doing what you love, like, never,
Mm,
like, it's just it's hard for me as someone who is an artist who did for so long make money at it. That critical attitude that some people get into. But I think what I also would ask is, so this is kind of tagging on. I know in one of your interviews you talked about going to Haiti on a mission trip when I think you were 15. And I went on many mission trips growing up. And you said in this, I'm paraphrasing, so I apologize if I'm getting this a little wrong, that it was really on that trip that you felt like you were going to be creating music for
mhm,
your life's call.
mhm,
And I love that God took you to an island very far from your house, the opposite
mhm.
end of the country. Then again, a hop over. My nephew's Haitian, um, to show you something. Do you ever feel? Do you ever reflect back on that moment and just still wonder why it took that? Not to say he wouldn't have revealed it to you at some other point, but do you ever? I'm just curious. Do you ever wonder why God used that experience to reveal that to you?
I think it was, I think there's a few different reasons, but I think one of the biggest things that I look back on is like that was probably one of the first times in my life where I like sat alone and I like listened. And that like is so, it was so like foreign to me. I'm like I was very social in high school too. Like I was like social little butterfly. I was always hanging out with people, and the team leader on that trip, who was one of my friends, had kind of encouraged each one of the each person on the team. It was a small team of us, maybe 16 people, maybe 20. But each one of us on the team, he had like written us a letter and like here's what I'm praying for you for this trip. It was really sweet. But for me, which is hilarious because at the time I was like really offended, but his thing was like, hey, I'm praying that you can find time to like be alone with God. And like, and he was like, he meant it in a way of like encouragement of like it was just so funny because I was like, excuse me. But it was, so I was like literally taking time on this trip to intentionally like be alone, which was really hard for me. And I don't know what it was, but I didn't have an alarm set. I would get up before everybody else on this trip, and probably every morning, if not almost every morning. And it was like I was just woken up, and it was, we were staying next to this church in this compound, but it was an unfinished as most buildings are there. Most places are an unfinished rooftop. So I would go upstairs, and it was like I would sit on the roof with my journal, and the sun would be coming up. And a few mornings there was a women's Bible study going on, and they would be singing, which that was just absolutely incredible. It was so beautiful. I have prayed that I could hear them sing again. Like it's just it was, I cannot even describe the experience. But it was, I think it was a huge part of that was like the first time that I actually sat alone, and maybe it didn't have to be that it was all the way over on the other side of the country on an island, but I think that was like really because it was the first time I sat and listened and like really by myself. And I didn't, it wasn't like the first day that happened. I think it was just over the course of that trip, and I would just kind of sit by myself with God. And like that was probably the first time in my life I had done that. And so I think that was, and I was 15, so I was asking, like I was like, I don't know what my future holds. I was asking and I was praying, and I was like, what do I do? And that's probably why, is because that was like the first time I like gave God that time, which sounds so funny and so like, oh, obviously I should have been doing that before, but it was like really a pretty powerful thing in like my story of like I sat probably for
Yeah.
the first time just in alone with God.
Yeah. I love that answer, because I think it's something that echoes in everyone's life. Life gets busy and hectic and scheduled, and it's so easy to not carve out time for the Lord, but to say, I actually love your honesty. Like, that was probably the first time I ever really sat by myself and the Lord, and just said, no offense, you're not there for any other reason except to serve and like be with the Lord, right?
Right.
So I know you have to go, but Leanna, before you go, I just want to say, number one, I love your music. I love your honesty. I love that you're a happy person and you like to show that in your music as well. But I also just want to say it's honoring to meet someone that wants to just be a catalyst for God through your gifts. And I love that you haven't let, even in the wrestling of the business industry and the creativity for cash, as some people call it. And I'm like, again, whoop, whoop, like I'm all in on that. Like, yes, Jesus, bring it to more of us. Thank you very much. But at the same time, I just want to say, like, just before we go, even though I will be praying for your marriage and for, as you guys come alongside each other in your dreams, that it doesn't even feel like you're wrestling that out. It's just going to be seamless. And I love that you're marrying someone that gets it, that gets hard work, but that you do carve out time for God, but for each other. And it's just been such an honor getting to know you. And I know everybody who listens to this will be looking, if they're like, who's Leanna Crawford? Just look below and go find her stuff, because it is, you'll be like me and you'll download everything to your playlist. And I was playing listen to this. And my boys, I mean, they love new music, so they'll love it. But thank you so much for your time again. And I don't want to even say best of luck. That's cheeseball. Like, I don't wish people luck. Like, I just know God's going to use you. And I'm so happy you have a solid family to keep you rooted and encouraged, because you are in a place of honor. And that can feel very humbling and a little scary, but I would be proud to have my kids look up to someone like you. So it's been such a blessing to meet you. So thank you for this time.
Thank you. I've seriously loved our conversation. Thank you so much for having me. Seriously, this has been such a blessing to me today. Thank you.
Well, you are welcome, and hopefully get rest, because I hear musicians never get that because they're always on the road. You're always touring. Except on the tour.
I love it. It's a fun life.
Yeah, it is fun. And I love that you think it's fun. Because that's what you're wired to do. Like, God's like, I'm going to call her because she'll think this is fun.
There are days, but for the most part.
I just want to nap, you guys. That's all I need.
Yeah.
10 minutes. Thank you so much, Leanna.
Thank you so much, Charity. Thank you.